Would you believe me if I told you that the key to transforming your entire life might be hidden in a gesture so simple, it almost seems ridiculous? Imagine someone who didn't finish school, had no money, no influential contacts, and yet climbed out of debt to build a millionaire's life. Sounds unlikely, doesn't it? But I discovered it's not the surrounding reality that dictates the game, but rather what you decide to do with it, every single day, in silence, when no one is watching. I spent a good portion of my life believing that the answer to all my problems lay in hard work. I believed that if I pushed myself harder, put in more hours, sacrificed sleep, the inevitable result would be wealth and freedom. But when I started observing the world around me, I realized this was a grand illusion. You see, there are people who wake up every day before the sun rises, work themselves to exhaustion, and yet at the end of the month, they're worried about how they'll pay their bills. Bricklayers who build skyscrapers but could never afford a home of their own. Nurses and teachers who give themselves entirely to others but live suffocated by debt. Drivers who spend more than 10 hours a day in traffic and still have to choose between paying a bill or putting food on the table. This isn't a coincidence. It's proof that physical effort or excessive dedication by themselves don't guarantee prosperity. I myself have been in that cycle. I worked various jobs considered honest, but that led me nowhere. I'd reach the end of the month with nothing but exhaustion and frustration, and perhaps you felt this too. The sensation that the more you work, the less is left for you. This creates a knot in your mind, a painful question. Is life really just this? To work until your body can't take it anymore and still remain trapped in debt and worries. This is the silent prison in which most people live, believing that the way out is simply to work more, without realizing they are stuck in a model that never worked. Modern studies on financial well-being confirm this pattern. Research reveals that people with 2 or even 3 jobs still face severe financial problems, not because they don't work hard enough, but because effort without direction, effort without the right mindset, does not produce abundance. Working more hours might even increase your salary for a while, but it rarely creates freedom, because freedom is not achieved merely through physical sweat, but with mental clarity, new habits, and the courage to break paradigms. I needed to see that the problem wasn't in the quantity of work, but in the type of work, and most importantly, in how I saw myself in the face of opportunities. When I finally understood this, I realized that wealthy people weren't those who worked the most hours, but rather those who thought differently. They found paths that seemed invisible to others. That's why some seem to attract money naturally, while others, despite all their efforts, remain trapped in scarcity. I remember nights when I'd come home completely exhausted, lie in bed, and still couldn't sleep, because my mind was overwhelmed by overdue bills, worries, and that silent fear that I would never escape that situation. What I didn't realize was that all that effort was nothing more than a repetitive cycle that only reinforced my condition. I was stuck in the paradigm of scarcity, believing that the only way to win was by sacrificing more and more, when in reality, I needed to change the way I thought about myself and about money. And perhaps that's exactly where you find yourself today. Ask yourself, has working harder truly solved my problems, or has it just left me more tired and worried? Isn't it time to question this idea that physical effort is the only key to prosperity? The world is full of people who sacrifice themselves every day, and yet live only to survive. True transformation doesn't begin in the work itself, but in how you approach your mind, your vision for the future, and your ability to attract and create opportunities. Because when your mindset changes, work ceases to be a prison and transforms into a bridge. And it's at that point that an extraordinary life begins to be built. I discovered throughout my journey that money isn't just a piece of paper or a number on a bank screen. It is energy, pure vibration. Everything in the universe vibrates at a certain frequency. Your body, your thoughts, your emotions, even the words you speak. Money is no exception to this rule. It has its own frequency, and if you're not in tune with it, you might even acquire some momentarily, but it slips through your hands like sand. How many times have you seen someone earn good money and then immediately lose everything to debts, bad decisions, or simple carelessness? That's not bad luck, it's merely a frequency misalignment. In the beginning, I myself lived in total misalignment. I worked hard, but I vibrated with scarcity. I'd wake up thinking about overdue bills, spend the day worried about what could go wrong, and go to sleep imagining what it would be like if everything completely fell apart. This was the frequency I was emanating, and it was exactly what I attracted. More bills, more problems, more difficulties, until the moment I realized that nothing external would change if my interior remained the same. The transformation began when I understood that wanting money wasn't enough. I needed to become compatible with it. Think of a radio. You can turn the dial all day long, but you'll only hear music if you're tuned to the correct station. The same thing happens with money. If you spend your days vibrating with fear, anxiety, and worry, you're tuned into a station that broadcasts scarcity. And no matter how hard you work, that will always be the music playing. Now, when you adjust your mind and start vibrating with abundance, gratitude, and possibility, a new station opens up. It's at this point that ideas emerge, people appear, and previously invisible opportunities become clear before you. Science has already proven that thoughts and emotions create real electromagnetic fields. Neuroscience studies show that repeating positive mental images changes how the brain perceives reality and begins to direct its attention towards solutions that previously went unnoticed. This means that when you consciously choose to think about prosperity, you are literally programming your brain to identify and attract paths of growth. I experienced this firsthand. When I shifted my focus, I stopped seeing only problems and started noticing conversations, ideas, and businesses that had always been around me, but that my mental filter ignored. That's how I heard about someone who made a living cleaning offices, a simple piece of information that I would have previously dismissed, but at that moment it shone brightly before me. It was the beginning of a journey that changed my destiny, and perhaps you too need to ask yourself now, what station are you tuned into? When you wake up in the morning, is the first thought that enters your mind about debts, difficulties, and lack, or about possibilities, solutions, and abundance? Because that's exactly what determines the type of experience you attract daily. If today your financial life seems like an endless cycle of struggle, it's not because you don't deserve to prosper, but because you haven't yet adjusted your frequency. Money doesn't respond to desperation. It responds to confidence. It doesn't respond to fear, it responds to clarity. When you deeply understand that it's not the world that needs to change, but your inner vibration, you will hold the key to an extraordinary life. It's in this silent alignment, invisible to the eyes, that true transformation begins. There was a time in my life when everything seemed out of control. I was in debt, without prospects, without an academic degree, and yet something inside me said there was a way out. It was then that I received a simple piece of advice, almost absurd at first glance, to write down on a small card the amount of money I wanted to earn. I clearly remember what I wrote: $25,000. For that young man who had nothing, this number sounded like a distant fantasy, almost like writing, "I want to travel to the moon." I had no idea how it could happen, and precisely because of that, it seemed ridiculous. But I accepted the challenge. Every day, without fail, I would take that card out of my pocket and read it aloud. I'd read it when I was tired, when I was worried, when nothing seemed to make sense. At first, I confess, it caused me more doubt than hope. My mind screamed, "This is impossible, you have no education, no contacts, no chance at all." But still I kept reading, and it was in this repetitive process that something began to change within me. It wasn't money appearing out of nowhere. It was my way of thinking that began to transform. Gradually, my brain started to see possibilities that had previously been invisible. It's like planting a seed. At first, you look at the earth and see nothing, just empty soil. But if you keep watering it day after day, new life begins to sprout. That's how that card worked. Each reading was a drop of water nourishing the root of my new reality. With each repetition, my mind gradually aligned itself with the idea that it could indeed be possible. And when the mind accepts, the body begins to act towards the new. I started taking risks in conversations, listening to people I used to ignore, opening myself up to opportunities that had always been around me. Science today explains this clearly. Repetition creates new neurological patterns. The brain has something called the reticular activating system, which acts as a filter. It sifts through the millions of pieces of information we receive every day, selecting what seems relevant to us. When you repeat an objective out loud daily, you train this system to identify any detail that might bring you closer to your purpose. And what once went unnoticed suddenly jumps out at you. That's exactly what happened to me. I started noticing people talking about simple businesses, small service ideas, and one of them caught my attention. Someone was mentioning cleaning offices and making a living from it. For many, it was irrelevant, but for me, at that moment, it shone like an opportunity. And that's where I started my first venture, with no experience, just courage, a bucket, a broom, and the mindset that I could turn it into something bigger. This card, which seemed like just a piece of paper, turned into a turning point. Not because it had magical power, but because it shaped my thoughts, and my thoughts shaped my actions. The big truth is that you don't attract what you desire, you attract what you repeatedly believe and feel. That's how I went from someone drowning in debt to someone capable of generating an income that once seemed unattainable. And that's why I insist, if you've never clearly written down what you truly desire, you're leaving your life adrift. A boat without a clear destination is dragged by any current, but when you define an objective and repeat it every day, you become the captain who holds the rudder firm even when the storm rages. This small habit, too simple for many to take seriously, is what changed the course of my life. And it can change yours too, if you have the courage to persist, even when everything seems impossible. From an early age, all of us are bombarded with phrases and beliefs that settle deeply in our minds. Money is dirty. Anyone who gets rich must have cheated someone. Life is hard. You have to suffer to be someone. These ideas seem innocent when spoken, but the truth is they act like seeds planted in our subconscious. Even before the age of 7, our minds are completely open, absorbing every word without filters. And what we hear repeatedly from our parents, teachers, neighbors, and even the media gradually becomes a silent truth that guides our choices for the rest of our lives. I also grew up with these internal voices, and I realized that even after I started earning more money, something inside me pulled me back down. Whenever a bigger opportunity arose, a hidden voice would say, "That's not for you." And this voice is dangerous because it sabotages you without you even realizing it. It's like trying to run with chains on your feet. You believe you're moving forward, but with every step, something invisible keeps you trapped in the same spot. These inherited paradigms not only influence what we believe is possible, but also determine how we feel about our achievements. That's why so many people, upon receiving a promotion, an unexpected award, or even an inheritance, feel uncomfortable, as if they aren't worthy of it. They reject opportunities out of fear, procrastinate important decisions, and sometimes even sabotage their own results. All of this is because deep down, they still carry the idea that they don't deserve it. Psychological research shows that our self-image acts like a thermostat. It regulates how capable and worthy we believe ourselves to be. If you have a self-image of being limited, even if you earn more money or have access to more resources, you'll unconsciously find a way to return to the level where you feel comfortable. This is what I experienced. At one point, I was earning more than I had ever imagined. But instead of expanding my life, I started making destructive decisions, as if I wanted to prove that it was all just a fleeting accident. It wasn't bad luck. It was my scarcity paradigm trying to pull me back to my comfort zone. How many times have you noticed this pattern in your own life? Whenever you're about to move forward, something happens, and it feels like you're back at square one. This isn't a coincidence. It's just the old programming at work. What you need to understand is that these paradigms weren't chosen by you, but today you have the power to question them. And when you start doing that, the game changes. It took me a long time to understand that simply learning strategies, reading books, or attending courses wasn't enough. As long as my mindset wasn't reprogrammed, I would always end up with the same results. It was only when I started to confront these deeply rooted beliefs head-on, consciously replacing them with new ideas, that the real transformation began. It wasn't an easy process because it demands repetition, consistency, and most importantly, the courage to go against what was taught since childhood. But every small shift in my paradigm brought fruits that once seemed unattainable. And the great truth is that all of us carry within us beliefs that don't belong to us, inherited beliefs we never chose. Perhaps you still live under the shadow of these voices, but the power lies in recognizing this and deciding that you will no longer be a hostage to old ideas. From now on, you can choose to plant new seeds in your mind, because in the end, your life isn't shaped by what the world imposed on you, but by what you choose to believe about yourself. That's where true freedom begins. I'll never forget the story of a woman I met after one of my seminars. She had won a lawsuit and received about $80,000, an amount that, to her, seemed like a true fortune. For the first time, she had the chance to completely change her financial life. But 2 years later, all that money had vanished. Not only that, but she had also accumulated new debts. This episode deeply impacted me because it made me see clearly how the problem is never in the money itself, but in the mindset of the person who receives it. Money is merely a multiplier of what already exists within us. If you carry beliefs of scarcity, fear, and insecurity, that money will slip through your fingers in ways you won't even perceive. Perhaps it's through impulsive spending, bad investments, or even misguided decisions made in the heat of the moment. If the mind remains in poverty, no matter the amount that comes in, everything will be used to reinforce the internal pattern of lack. That's exactly what happened to this woman. Her external reality changed for a brief moment, but her internal identity remained the same. And as always, external life eventually adjusts to what you believe you deserve. This type of story isn't rare. All of us have seen cases of people who win the lottery and in a short time return to living as before, or even worse. Statistics show that more than 70% of big prize winners end up bankrupt after a few years. This happens because their minds haven't been trained to handle abundance. It's like handing a luxury car to someone who has never learned to drive. Sooner or later, the result will be a disaster. I also lived through this dilemma. When I started earning amounts much larger than I had ever imagined, I found myself in situations where I spent recklessly, as if I were trying to get rid of the money quickly. In part, it was an unconscious fear of not being worthy of it. In part, it was an attempt to return to my comfort zone where I was already accustomed to scarcity. Because success demands a new identity, a higher self-image, and this frightens those who are still trapped by old paradigms. This story made me realize that true change is never about numbers in a bank account, but about the paradigms that control how we use, feel about, and even relate to money. The same value that can transform someone's life can also destroy it, depending on the mindset that person carries. And this is where the truly important question comes in. How have you been preparing to receive the abundance you desire so much? If tomorrow you received an unexpected sum, would you be mentally ready to multiply it? Or would you end up finding unconscious ways to push it away? The big lesson is that without changing what's inside, nothing that comes from the outside will last. Therefore, before seeking more money, it's necessary to develop the mindset that sustains it. Because abundance isn't measured by what you receive, but by what you can sustain and expand. This woman showed me that it's not the value that transforms life, but consciousness. And when that consciousness awakens, then every dollar that comes to you ceases to be just a number and becomes a tool for building an extraordinary life. There's a point where most people give up. They start full of enthusiasm, believing that this time it will work, but soon after, the old pattern pulls them back. And it's not for lack of ability, it's for lack of consistency. I learned that the universe responds to consistency much more than to intensity. It's easy to feel inspired for one day. It's difficult to sustain that inspiration when no one is watching. And that's exactly where an extraordinary life is created, in the silence of small daily repetitions. When no one applauds you, when the result hasn't appeared yet, when everything inside you wants to quit. It's at that instant that your mind is reprogrammed. Have you ever noticed how when you try to change something in your life, it seems like the whole world turns against you? Bills pile up, doubts grow, fatigue sets in, and even those closest to you start questioning your choices. Is it really worth it, you ask yourself? But the universe is testing if you truly desire what you claim to want. It doesn't deny your wishes. It simply asks, are you ready to sustain them? And that's why I want you to pay attention now. If you've made it this far, it's because something within you craves more from life. So, if you're enjoying this video, subscribe right now and hit the like button. This isn't just a symbolic gesture, it's a commitment to yourself. It's your first step to affirming to the universe that you are determined to keep growing. I recall a time when my company started expanding at a rapid pace. People would look at me and say I was at my peak, but inside I felt fear. I wasn't sure if I was ready to handle such a significant level of success, and it was at that moment I realized fear doesn't surface when we're failing, it emerges when we start winning. Because success demands a new identity, a new self-image, and that transition can be painful. I remember one morning when I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. I had everything I had once dreamed of: wealth, recognition, travel, yet I still questioned if I was worthy of it. So I returned to my practice. I sat, I breathed, and I repeated my affirmations. I am prosperous, I am worthy, I am sufficient. I did this every single day, even when it seemed to make no discernible difference. Gradually, something began to shift within me. The fear started to dissipate, giving way to clarity. Have you ever felt that? That inner voice that whispers, what if I lose everything? What if I'm not capable? That voice isn't your adversary. It's merely the echo of your old identity trying to cling on. Every time you approach a new tier of success, your old mindset attempts to pull you back to what's familiar. It's the ego's self-preservation mechanism. It says, stay here, it's safer. But security doesn't foster expansion. Security is the antithesis of growth. And if there's one thing I've learned over all these years, it's that you'll never be entirely prepared. And that's perfectly fine. The crucial thing is to take the next step, even with apprehension. Behavioral scientists have shown that 95% of our decisions are made by the subconscious mind, and the subconscious is trained through repetition. This is why I speak so much about consistency. You don't need to comprehend everything, nor do you need to feel confident at every moment. You just need to keep showing up. Read your goal every single day. Visualize the outcome as if it were already real. Act in accordance with the new version of yourself, even when the world hasn't yet caught up. This is how your frequency shifts. The secret lies in maintaining that vibration, even when nothing seems to be working. I want you to think right now about something you truly aspire to achieve: a business, a relationship, financial liberation, and imagine that it is already yours. Feel that emotion for a few moments. Now observe how your body responds. That sensation is the frequency of what you desire. Your sole task is to remain in that state for as long as you possibly can. Everything else, opportunities, individuals, insights, will gravitate to align with that energy. This is the science of thought in action. The issue is that most people only believe what they see. They wait for the outcome to manifest before they trust. But the universe operates in reverse. You believe first, then you see. Just as a seed trusts that the soil will nurture it before it even sprouts. So if you're experiencing a period where nothing seems to be going right, do not despair. Keep doing what needs to be done. Keep visualizing, affirming, and above all, feeling. Because every thought consistent with your purpose is an invisible brick, constructing your new reality. Perhaps you might think it's insignificant, that hitting like, subscribing, or writing one sentence every single day won't change a thing. But this is precisely how profound transformations begin. Through small, consistent, intentional actions. It's the cumulative effect of these that generates the right vibration. And one day, when you least expect it, everything you've envisioned will start to materialize before your very eyes. And you will recall this specific moment. You will remember that you chose not to quit, that you chose to persevere. So, as you listen to my voice right now, promise yourself that you will not cease. Subscribe, continue with me, because each video is a piece of the puzzle of your expansion. And I guarantee you, if you apply what you are hearing here with discipline and unwavering faith, in a short while you will look back and realize you are no longer the same individual. Because daily change, however minor, is what forges an extraordinary life. I've come to understand that nothing genuinely changes until your mind embraces a new perception of who you are. Most people aspire to transform their lives, but continue to view themselves in the same way, tethered to the past, to limitations, to memories of failure. They desire a new outcome, but cling to an old identity, and that will never materialize. You can only attract what is compatible with the image you harbor within yourself. This is why I consistently state, the world doesn't compensate you for what you want. It compensates you for what you believe you merit. I recall a period when I was still with the Toronto Fire Department. My salary barely covered my expenses, and yet, whenever anyone spoke of earning a substantial amount of money, I would laugh and say, "That's not for me." I didn't realize that those very words were shaping my reality. Each time I reiterated that sentiment, I reinforced the notion within myself that I was not worthy of more. Until the day a man named Ray Stanford introduced me to the book Think and Grow Rich. He asked me, "Why shouldn't you be worthy of wealth if others are?" That question resonated within me for several days. I came to understand that the problem was never the world, nor a scarcity of opportunities. The problem was my self-image. I viewed myself as ordinary, restricted, and uneducated. And as long as I continued to perceive myself in that manner, the universe would consistently mirror precisely that back to me. Human beings live in accordance with the image they hold in their subconscious mind, and science has already substantiated this. Research from Stanford University demonstrates that the brain reacts to imagined thoughts in the exact same manner it responds to real experiences. In other words, what you repeatedly imagine becomes your emotional truth, and your body and behavior subsequently follow this programming without question. Therefore, when you envision yourself as successful, productive, confident, and you repeat this every single day, your brain begins to forge new neural pathways that support this pattern. And before you even realize it, your actions start to mirror this new identity. However, the converse is also true. If you perceive yourself as unlucky, disorganized, or destined for failure, your entire body and behavior will validate that conviction. It operates much like an emotional thermostat. It doesn't matter if you earn more, meet new individuals, or relocate to a different city, you invariably return to the same baseline because your internal self-image has not shifted. I have witnessed people inherit fortunes and squander everything in a few short years. I have seen lottery winners descend into bankruptcy, not due to irresponsibility, but because their subconscious mind simply would not accept that novel reality. The money had changed, but the identity had not. I myself had to completely reconstruct my self-image. Initially, when I launched my cleaning business, I still thought like a man of limited means. Even after beginning to earn thousands of US dollars, I felt uneasy with the success. I believed it was pure luck, that everything would inevitably collapse at any moment. And do you know what transpired? I nearly lost everything. I unconsciously created circumstances that pulled me back to the old pattern. Until the day I grasped that the success I had achieved was not an accident. It was a manifestation of the new mental frequency I had cultivated, and that if I wished to preserve it, I would need to perceive myself differently. Perhaps you are experiencing something similar. You work diligently, yet feel you're not progressing. You attract promising opportunities, but invariably find a way to self-sabotage in the end. This isn't misfortune. It's your self-image demanding congruence. The subconscious mind is steadfast. It will consistently bring you back to the level it believes is rightfully yours. This is why the most crucial work isn't what you undertake externally, but what you cultivate within. Alter the way you perceive yourself, and the surrounding world will begin to respond to that new vibration. Try something straightforward. Every single day, upon waking, look into the mirror and declare aloud who you choose to be. Not who you were, nor who others claimed you are, but who you have resolved to become. Say, I am worthy of abundance, I am disciplined, I am prosperous. Initially, it might sound inauthentic. Perhaps your mind will harbor doubt, but persist nonetheless. Repetition is the language of the subconscious. When it hears this every single day, it will begin to accept it as truth, and then your reality will reorder itself around this new conviction. I have witnessed individuals implement this and completely transform their lives. I recall a man who arrived at one of my seminars utterly defeated. He had lost his job, was burdened with debt, and his marriage was in ruins. I told him, "Before you change the world, alter the image you carry within yourself." He began practicing the self-image exercise daily. 3 months later, he secured a better job than his previous one. 6 months later, he inaugurated his own enterprise. 1 year later, he returned to the stage to share his story and declared, "The world didn't change, I did. And when I changed, the world followed suit." Neuroscience elucidates this clearly. The human brain seeks congruence between belief and behavior. When you modify the belief, the behavior adapts. And when the behavior transforms, the results inevitably shift. There is no enchantment, there is alignment. Your external life is a reflection of your internal life. If you want a different reflection, polishing the mirror won't help. You need to change the image. Every thought you nurture is a chisel stroke shaping your future. And what I want you to understand is that there is no fixed destiny. There is only the frequency you choose to sustain. Each day, with every thought, you are becoming someone. So, who do you choose to be starting today? Because when you change the way you see yourself, you change the way everything sees you. And it is at that moment that life truly begins to transform. There's a silent error that destroys the dreams of millions of people. They think they need to understand everything before acting. They get stuck trying to figure out the how instead of committing to the why. I discovered that the secret to creating an extraordinary life isn't in knowing all the steps, but in taking the first one, even without seeing the entire path. When you clearly define what you want and act towards it with faith and consistency, life takes it upon itself to reveal the bridges that didn't exist before. But the opposite is also true. When you wait for certainty to begin, opportunity disappears. I experienced this firsthand. When I started my first cleaning business, I had no idea how to run a company. I didn't know how to sell, how to hire, and barely knew how to price my work. All I had was a bucket, a used floor polisher, and one belief that I could make it work. The people around me said I was crazy for leaving the fire department, a stable job, to clean offices, and maybe I was, but I learned that faith is always a little crazy in the eyes of logic. And it was precisely that faith that made me wake up every day at 5 o'clock in the morning and go door to door offering my services. In less than 1 year, I was earning more than $100,000 without ever having studied business administration. I didn't wait for the manual, I wrote my own. Most people want to change their lives but can't stand the discomfort of the unknown. They say, "When I have money, I'll start my business. When I have time, I'll take care of my health. When everything is perfect, I'll change." But the universe doesn't respond to perfect conditions. It responds to movement. It is movement that generates energy, and energy that generates results. Think of a bicycle. It only balances when it's in motion. The same applies to your life. Paralysis is the symptom of doubt, and doubt is the opposite of faith. I remember a woman who approached me at one of the seminars. She was talented, intelligent, but had been stuck in a job she hated for 10 years. I asked, "Why don't you leave and start something of your own?" She replied, "Because I don't know if it will work out." I looked her in the eyes and said, "You'll never know until you start." Months later, she wrote to me saying she had quit her job, started a small pastry business, and for the first time in years felt alive. She wasn't earning as much as before yet, but she told me something I've never forgotten. "I traded security for freedom, and I discovered that freedom is the soul's true salary." Science calls this the creative expectation effect. Studies from Harvard University show that when the brain believes something is possible, it literally begins to reorganize neural circuits to find pathways that make it real. That's why clarity and decision are so powerful. When you decide with conviction, your subconscious springs into action, filtering information, people, and opportunities that vibrate at the same frequency as your intention. It's as if the world starts cooperating with you, but only after you take the first step. On the other hand, when you stand still waiting to feel ready, energy stagnates. Uncertainty transforms into fear. Fear turns into procrastination, and procrastination turns into a cycle of self-sabotage. How many times have you told yourself you'd start on Monday next month or at the beginning of the year? And how many times did that moment actually arrive? Time isn't the problem, doubt is, and doubt is proof that you're trying to live with your eyes on the future instead of your feet in the present. What changes everything is commitment. When you truly commit to a goal, there's no "what if it doesn't work out?" There's only "how do I make it work out?" This shift in mindset completely transforms your vibration. The universe doesn't respond to lukewarm attempts. It responds to conviction. It's like lighting a match. Either there's fire or there isn't. I often say that when you take one step towards your dream, the dream takes 10 towards you. But it takes courage to leave waiting mode and enter creation mode. You don't need to see the entire staircase, just the first step. Because with each step, the next one reveals itself. Doubt asks, what if it goes wrong? Faith asks, what if it goes right? And between these two questions lies all the power to transform your life. If you want to test this, I propose a simple challenge. Choose an area of your life, finances, career, health, or relationships, and for the next 7 days, act as if the result you desire were already certain. Speak, think, and behave like someone who has already achieved it. Observe what changes within you and around you. The universe doesn't respond to words. It responds to the coherence between what you feel, think, and do. Action is the language of commitment. When you act, even without guarantees, you send a clear signal that you believe. And this belief is what moves mountains, what opens doors, what attracts people and circumstances you never imagined encountering. I've seen this happen with myself and with thousands of people throughout my life. The difference between those who succeed and those who give up isn't in intelligence or opportunities. It's in the willingness to keep moving forward, even when the path isn't yet lit. So if today you feel you're in the dark, remember this. The light never appears before the first step. It is movement that lights the lamp. And with each step taken, you get closer to the life you were created to live. Life doesn't wait for the ideal moment. It reveals itself to those who have the courage to move. There is something profoundly tragic in seeing someone achieve success only to lose it soon after. And this happens all the time. People earn fortunes, gain fame, reach the pinnacle, and in just a few years, everything disappears. It's not bad luck. It's not a lack of talent. It's the mind trying to return to its equilibrium point, the level of prosperity it believes it deserves. Your external life will always adjust to your internal image. If within you there is scarcity, fear, and guilt, no matter how much money comes in, your subconscious will find a way to get rid of it. I remember when I first witnessed this brutally. A close friend, extremely talented, started earning millions of dollars each year. He had a powerful voice, a striking presence, a true leader. But he carried within him a silent belief, I don't deserve this much. He grew up hearing that money corrupts, that rich people are selfish, and that to be humble is to live with little. Initially, he thought he could ignore it, but the subconscious cannot be ignored. It manifests. And when success arrived, he started sabotaging himself. He spent impulsively, got involved in dubious projects, made thoughtless decisions. In less than 5 years, everything he had built disappeared. Not because of a lack of opportunity, but because success didn't fit the image he had of himself. Have you noticed how some people always return to the same point, no matter how much they advance? Lottery winners who lose everything, brilliant entrepreneurs who crash after an expansion, artists who destroy their own careers. It's the same pattern. The external world grows, but the internal one remains small. And the subconscious, like an invisible rubber band, pulls them back to the level they believe to be safe. Mike Tyson is a classic example. He earned over $300 million during his career, but lost everything. The physical strength he had in the rings was nothing compared to the internal battles he didn't know how to face. Money merely amplified what already existed within him: confusion, pain, limiting beliefs. Money doesn't change people. It merely reveals who they are at their core. If fear exists within you, money will increase that fear. If generosity exists within you, it will expand it. Financial energy is neutral. It amplifies the emotional state you carry. And that's why working on your mindset is more important than any strategy. Without a prepared mind, abundance becomes a burden. But there's the other side. People who build their wealth from the inside out rarely lose it. They know that money is just a reflection of the value they deliver and the consciousness they uphold. Oprah Winfrey is an example of this. She came from extreme poverty, faced abuse, prejudice, and rejection. Everything indicated she was destined for a life of scarcity, but she made a decision not to let circumstances define who she was. She began to feed her mind with ideas of abundance, purpose, and impact. And even when the world said no, she said yes to herself. Today, she is one of the most influential and wealthy women on the planet. And most impressively, her wealth is not based solely on money, but on purpose and consciousness. What differentiates people like Oprah from those who lose everything is their internal foundation. A tree only withstands strong winds because it has deep roots. The same applies to success. If your roots are fragile, the first gale will knock you down. And these roots are called belief, self-confidence, and identity. Money is the tree's canopy, visible, admired, but it is the invisible that sustains it. I've experienced this personally. When I started earning significant money, I noticed something peculiar. I felt uneasy. It was as if a part of me whispered that it was too much. Unconsciously, I began to act in ways that would steer me back to what was familiar. I realized I was on the verge of sabotaging everything I had built, and that's when the true lesson hit me. Success demands that you perceive yourself as capable of sustaining it. I had to sit down with myself, look in the mirror, and reprogram my mind. I wrote down simple affirmations and recited them daily. I am worthy of prosperity. I am a channel of abundance. I deserve the best in life. Gradually, my mind began to embrace this new reality. And once it did, my financial life found its footing. Neuroscience refers to this as psychological homeostasis. It's the mechanism that drives the mind to seek equilibrium between beliefs and reality. When external reality surpasses the internal boundary you deem normal, your subconscious generates behaviors to reinstate balance. This is why changing your life without changing your beliefs is futile. The mind will sabotage anything it doesn't recognize as possible. Perhaps now you grasp why so many people exert effort without making any real progress. They change jobs, cities, partners, yet remain stuck with the same outcomes. This is because their underlying programming remains unchanged. The truth is, success isn't an event, it's a state of mind. You must first embody the person capable of living that life. Only then will the universe align the corresponding circumstances. So, take an honest look within yourself. Is there a part of you that feels uneasy with the idea of prospering? A voice that claims you're not worthy, that it's too risky, or that others will judge you? This is the root that needs healing. As long as it persists, every achievement will be fleeting. But when you align your mind with an awareness of abundance, success will cease to be a burden and will simply become a natural extension of who you are. True prosperity isn't about accumulating more, it's about feeling at peace with what you have and remaining open to receive what is yet to come. For when your inner world becomes fertile, your outer world inevitably blossoms. And when that happens, nothing and no one can take away what is rightfully yours. There's a very fine line between staying true to what you believe and remaining trapped by patterns that no longer serve you. Most people live under the influence of beliefs that aren't even their own, ideas inherited from parents, school, religion, society. And what's most intriguing is how they defend these as absolute truths. Money doesn't buy happiness. Hard work is the only way. Some people are born lucky, others aren't. These phrases, reiterated for years, become invisible walls that restrict how much someone can grow. I myself lived this way for much of my youth. I believed life was a burden, that success was for a select few, and that my role was simply to survive. What I didn't realize was that these beliefs weren't truly mine. They were emotional loans from an environment that also subscribed to limitation. The human mind is programmable. From birth, we absorb everything around us unfiltered. Until the age of 7 years, the brain predominantly operates in theta waves, the same state utilized in hypnosis. This means that during this phase, we question nothing. We simply accept. If someone says, "You're messy, you're lazy, you're not good at this," the subconscious registers it as truth, and these small phrases shape how we view ourselves for decades. Later, when we try to change our lives, it's as if an invisible force pulls us back. You decide to start a business, but the old voice says, "That's risky." You dream of abundance, but the voice whispers, "That's not for you." It's not a lack of willpower. It's programming. I recall a man I met at one of my workshops. He was 45 years old, a competent professional yet utterly frustrated. He explained that whenever things started going well, something would inevitably go wrong. I asked him how his father used to talk about money. He replied, "My father always said money was the root of all evil." Then I asked, "And how do you feel when you start earning more?" He paused for a moment and answered, "Guilty." There was the answer. Unconsciously, he was sabotaging himself to avoid becoming what his father condemned. And once he realized this, he began the reprogramming process. In 6 months, he doubled his income. Not because he learned something new, but because he finally stopped fighting against himself. Science explains this very clearly. The brain forms neural pathways for every repeated thought. The more you reiterate an idea, the stronger it becomes. It's like walking through a field of tall grass. If you take the same path every day, soon a trail will form. The same holds true for thoughts. Old beliefs are deeply ingrained paths in the brain, and replacing them requires awareness and repetition. The good news is that the brain is plastic. It changes. And change begins the moment you decide to question what you believe. Ask yourself now, who taught me what I believe about money, love, success, and worthiness? Is that person happy? Do they live the life I aspire to live? If the answer is no, why continue carrying their ideas? It's a simple yet powerful exercise, because every questioned belief is a brick removed from the wall that separates you from your true expansion. I also had to break down these walls within myself. I remember one night when I was alone, reflecting on all I had achieved and how I still felt trapped. I had money, I had businesses, but something was missing. It was then that I realized that, on some level, I was still seeking approval. I wanted to prove to the world that I was enough. That realization brought me to tears, because I understood I was still living under the voice of a boy who once heard he wasn't smart enough. And in that instant, I decided to set him free. I wrote on a piece of paper, "I forgive myself for believing I needed to earn what was already mine by right." That simple gesture created space within me, and everything began to flow with greater ease afterward. Changing a belief isn't merely replacing one phrase with another. It's altering the emotion associated with it. You can say, "I am rich," 1,000 times, but if deep down you feel fear or guilt, the vibration remains one of scarcity. This is why the practice needs to be emotional. When you repeat a new belief, feel it with your entire being. See, hear, and mentally live the reality you wish to create. This is the language your subconscious understands: emotion and repetition. Think about how many times you've sabotaged yourself by believing you weren't capable. How many opportunities you let slip by because the old programming said, "That's not for you." Now imagine what would happen if, for 30 days, you replaced every thought of doubt with an affirmation of power. Not just by saying, but by feeling. Imagine if every time fear arose, you said, "This is merely an echo from the past. I choose the new." In 30 days, your brain would begin to recognize this new route as the natural path. I've seen people literally reborn by applying this. One woman who attended my workshops spent her entire life believing she wasn't good enough because she grew up hearing that a woman shouldn't earn more than her husband. For years, unconsciously, she sabotaged every opportunity for growth until she started reprogramming her beliefs. Today, she owns a company worth millions of dollars and helps other women do the same. The external world didn't change. What changed was her internal map. Everything you believe shapes what you experience. If you believe life is hard, it will be. If you believe love is scarce, it will be. If you believe abundance is natural, it will flow. The universe plays no favorites. It merely responds to your dominant vibration. And that vibration is born from the thoughts you nurture every single day. So, look within and ask, whose beliefs are these that I carry? Do they serve me? Do they empower me? If the answer is no, acknowledge them, release them, and replace them. The mind is like a garden. If you don't plant what you desire, weeds will grow on their own. Cultivate new thoughts with intention, water them with emotion, and protect them with action. And with time, the field of your mind will blossom into a completely different reality, not because the world has changed, but because you finally chose to think for yourself. For years, I believed that changing my life meant changing my circumstances. I thought I needed a new job, a new city, new connections, but I discovered something that changed everything. Nothing changes externally while what's within remains the same. The outer world is simply the perfect reflection of your inner world. It doesn't show you what you want. It shows you what you are. That's why so many people change environments, partners, careers, yet continue to repeat the same results. Because they carry with them the same pattern of thoughts, emotions, and beliefs. It's like replacing a mirror and expecting to see a different face. Modern physics and psychology have already confirmed this. The human brain doesn't distinguish between what is imagined and what is experienced. When you think about something with enough emotion, the body reacts as if it were real. It releases the same hormones, activates the same neural networks, and creates the same emotional imprints. This is why your reality isn't shaped by what happens, but by how you interpret what happens. And that interpretation stems from your mental frequency, the vibration you maintain daily. When someone lives constantly in a state of worry, the brain enters survival mode. It begins to filter the world through fear. Everything appears difficult, risky, threatening. Opportunities may be right next to us, yet our minds often don't even register them because they're hardwired to detect danger, not potential. This isn't philosophy, it's biology. The reticular activating system, a structure in the brain, determines what enters your conscious awareness based on what you focus on. If your focus is on problems, you'll perceive more problems. If your focus shifts to solutions, you'll begin to see pathways where previously you only saw walls. It was precisely this way for me. There was a time when I constantly complained about a lack of money. I believed the world was unfair, that wealthy people were simply lucky, and that I worked harder only to earn less. But what I failed to realize was that every complaint was a seed planted in scarcity. I'd wake up afraid, go to sleep afraid, yet hoped abundance would blossom in such soil. Then one day, a mentor shared something that entirely transformed my way of thinking. He said, "Bob, you're trying to harvest apples from ground where you're planting thorns." That hit me hard. I grasped that my life was merely a reflection of what I cultivated mentally. I made a conscious decision to shift my focus. I started expressing gratitude for everything I already possessed, no matter how little. I stopped discussing debts and began talking about possibilities instead. And slowly, things started to change. Initially, these weren't grand events, and they were subtle coincidences: a fresh business opportunity, an unexpected conversation, an idea sparked during a shower. And looking back, I realized my entire reality had transformed. Yet nothing external had truly changed. What had shifted was the frequency I was emitting, and this is what many fail to grasp. Life doesn't respond to what you merely want. It responds to what you vibrate. Desiring prosperity while vibrating fear is akin to trying to tune into two different radio stations simultaneously. The sound becomes pure static. The universe operates with coherence. It requires you to be coherent as well. You will only attract what aligns with your dominant emotion. Therefore, the real work isn't about seeking more, but about becoming more. When you alter your vibration, the entire world reorders itself to reflect that change. I've witnessed this happen with individuals across the globe. A man burdened by debt started writing every single day, "I am financially free." Initially, he didn't believe it, but he persisted in the repetition. In 6 months, he secured a better job. In 1 year, he launched his own company. The money didn't manifest through magic. It appeared because the person he had become was capable of attracting it. Conversely, I've also observed the opposite. Individuals who achieved their desires but remained trapped by the fear of losing them. They vibrated scarcity, and the universe responded on that identical frequency. I recall an entrepreneur I met at an event. He had sold his company for millions of dollars, yet he lived in a constant state of anxiety. Distrustful, always anticipating the worst. One day he confided in me, "Bob, I have everything I ever wanted, but I can't relax." And I replied, "That's because your mind is still operating from a place of poverty. You changed your bank balance, but you haven't changed your inner pattern." And within months he lost a significant portion of his wealth due to impulsive decisions driven by fear. The mind acts like a magnet. It doesn't attract what is fair or deserved. It attracts what is similar. If you desire prosperity, you must align yourself with the energy of prosperity. If you seek love, you must align yourself with the energy of love. It's impossible to live in gratitude and simultaneously attract scarcity. It's impossible to live in fear and attract freedom. Emotions are the language of the universe, and it understands what you feel, not merely what you say. Scientists refer to this as electromagnetic coherence. The heart and brain emit measurable energy fields, and when both are aligned, when what you think is congruent with what you feel, your entire being enters a state of harmony. In this state, decisions become clearer, opportunities emerge naturally, and synchronicity becomes a regular part of your routine. Have you ever had the feeling of thinking about someone only for them to call you seconds later, or intensely desired something and witnessed it manifest a short while after? This is vibrational coherence in action. So ask yourself now, what has been your predominant vibration over the past few days? Have you been focusing on lack or on possibility, on fear or on confidence? Life neither punishes nor rewards, it merely reflects. And the most accurate reflection you will find is that of your emotions. True transformation begins when you assume full responsibility for your own vibration. When you understand that you are not a victim of circumstances, but rather their creator. From that moment on, nothing is random. Everything becomes a response. And the more you align with what you desire, the more the universe works in your favor. This is the essence of the law of attraction, the foundation of thought physics, and the core of all lasting change. The world outside is merely an echo of the world within. There comes a moment in every person's life when they finally grasp that they no longer need to chase after things, only to align with them. When you understand this, effort transforms into flow. Internal struggles cease, anxiety dissolves, and life begins to move with an almost inexplicable smoothness. This is true freedom, living in harmony with who you truly are. What prevents most people from reaching this point isn't a lack of knowledge, but their insistence on clinging to their old version of themselves. They keep trying to create a new future with a past mindset, and that is impossible. The old mind is composed of fears, guilt, regrets, and justifications. It convinces you that change is dangerous, that comfort is safer. But the truth is, comfort is existence's most insidious trap. It doesn't cause pain, but it also doesn't inspire. It keeps you alive but not awake. And when you live in this state, you start believing that mediocrity is normal, that living in exhaustion is inevitable, that settling for little is prudent. This was precisely how I lived, until I realized I wasn't born to merely survive. I was born to create. I recall a specific day, long before I wrote, "You were born rich." I was alone in a small office after a seminar. I had spoken to hundreds of people, but by the end the room was empty. I sat in the chair and began reflecting on everything I had been through, from debts and failures to an ascent I could never have imagined. And I realized something profound. My entire journey could be summarized by a single choice, the choice to think differently. Everything I achieved, all the results, all the transformations, stemmed from the moment I decided to alter what was happening in my mind. I understood that every day offers a chance to rewrite one's own destiny. But most people squander this chance because they wait to feel ready. They want to change without discomfort, evolve without letting go of anything, grow without allowing the old to die. And that is impossible, All transformation demands loss. You must release the old version of yourself to make space for the new. You need to abandon excuses, old fears, and the stories you repeat to justify inaction. Because as long as the past dictates your decisions, the future will remain merely a repetition with different dates. Science already knows that the subconscious mind learns through emotional repetition. This means that if you wish to create a new life pattern, you must daily repeat the thoughts and emotions that sustain that pattern. This is how a new identity is formed. That's why I always say, success isn't an event, it's a habit. It isn't a leap, it's a daily step in the right direction. When you change what you do every day, as what you read, what you think, what you feel, what you say, you inevitably change the trajectory of your life. I've seen ordinary people completely transform their reality simply by applying this principle. A man, a bus driver, began listening to me every day while at work. He wrote to me years later, saying that his 2-hour commute had become his classroom. He started altering what he told himself. He shifted from I can't to I can't yet, but I will. This minor linguistic change altered everything. He began studying, started a small business, and within a few years, he was teaching others about personal development. He shared something I've never forgotten. I didn't need luck. I needed repetition. Repetition is the tool for reprogramming. Each time you consciously choose a positive thought over a negative one, you reinforce a new neural pathway. Neuroscience terms this neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity to reshape itself through experience. So imagine the power of cultivating day after day thoughts of abundance, gratitude, courage, and purpose. In a short while, you literally become a different person, and the universe, which always mirrors your internal state, begins to reorganize itself according to this new identity. But there's something even more profound. When you change, your environment changes. People who once criticized you begin to respect you. Situations that seemed chaotic start to resolve themselves. What once appeared as an obstacle transforms into a bridge. Because the world isn't fixed, it's molded by your vibration. And when you elevate yours, everything around you elevates with it. You don't need to understand how the universe will make things happen. You simply need to remain faithful to what you wish to create. When your mind, your heart, and your actions vibrate in the same direction, the impossible becomes inevitable. This is the beauty of the process. You don't control the when or the how, but you have absolute dominion over the who. And it is the who you become that defines everything that will come. I like to think that every thought is a seed. If you plant fear, you harvest limitation. If you plant faith, you harvest expansion. And the more you water these seeds with action and gratitude, the more the garden of your life flourishes. Abundance isn't a destination, it's a state of being. The extraordinary life you seek already exists within you, waiting to be tapped into. It's simply waiting for the moment you decide to stop viewing yourself as someone trying to get somewhere, and instead start seeing yourself as someone who already is there. So, right this very instant, make a choice. Choose to raise your vibration. Choose to think with purpose. Choose to act with intention. Don't wait for one grand miracle, because the miracle is already happening. It's your very consciousness in this moment. Every single small step in the right direction is a manifestation. And the more you align, the more effortlessly life flows. And if this message resonates with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Perhaps it's the missing seed that will awaken the power they haven't yet realized they possess. Because the world needs more awakened souls, more conscious minds, more hearts vibrating with love and purpose. And if you've made it this far, it's because you are a part of that. The extraordinary life begins with one single daily change, and that change is you. I'll see you in the next video.